Hello, beautiful, and welcome to another episode of Beautiful, I Am Colored. My name is Evelyn, and this is the place where I share stories from my debut book that holds the same title as this podcast. I am honored that you have returned to hear more of my stories, and thank you to those of you who have been listening. I appreciate your support. For those interested, you can follow me on Instagram at Beautiful I Am Colored, and please consider adding me as your favorites or subscribing. This week, I will be sharing 2 additional stories from my book. But as you all know, first up, a little bit of business. Copyright 2022 by E.D. Booth, also known as Evelyn Barnes, all rights reserved. No parts of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including storage and retrieval system, without the written permission of the publisher. Otherwise, me. The first story today is titled Forerunner. I've never had a brand new car. I define brand new as being the first owner of a year and make of a vehicle in the current year. So I would consider, say for example, a 2019 Toyota Camry, for which I was the first owner, a new car. So yeah, I have never owned a new car. For the longest time, we've always purchased used cars with cash. We tried to purchase vehicles that didn't change body styles very often. Toyotas, for example, tend to keep the same or similar body styles for about 5 years. So you could technically drive something that was 10 years old, but doesn't look outdated since the body styles seldom change. I currently drive a 1997 white Toyota 4Runner. It's 2019. And while this vehicle has served me well, in recent years, I've become impatient and at times embarrassed because the circle of people I engage with all have higher end cars or at least much newer vehicles. I failed to mention that this vehicle also does not have air conditioning. The air conditioning went out in 2015 when we lived in hot-ass Arizona. The mechanic said the clutch to the compressor had melted and the cost of repair would be about $1,200, which would mostly include labor. I just knew in 2015 that I would finally have a new car within the next 12 months. So I sweated that summer out, believing a new car would be coming soon. Clearly, that didn't happen. And now, 4+ years later, I'm still riding around hot in the summer months. It just didn't make sense to me to spend that amount of money on a used vehicle when I could apply that same amount to a new car. But this car is teaching me a humbling lesson. I still cringe when I arrive at certain social functions when I pull up in the 97 4Runner. And please, oh please don't let someone ask me for a ride or see me get into the car. I can only imagine what thoughts might be lingering. Similar to learning how to appreciate being a size 12-14 in clothes, my truck has taught me that I should be proud and humbled to have a vehicle that's paid for and requires very little maintenance. It gets me where I need to go and functions as it should, with the exception of being uncomfortable in the summer months. A 4Runner, by definition, is a person or thing that precedes the coming or development of someone or something else, a sign of something to come. So just like my old 4Runner, I am developing into the person who is to come. Reflective question. Are you still developing? How do you hope to be remembered by family and friends? So each week when I share these stories, I tell you, it brings back so many memories. But as you noticed in the story about the 4Runner, I wrote this story several years back. It's actually an entry from an old blog that I used to have some years ago. But I'll tell you that in rereading this story and essentially reliving the experience of the Forerunner, which I no longer have, by the way, it definitely reminds me that I need to continue to be content with right where I am, and also to be grateful. Sometimes we have things in our lives that, we become accustomed to, and we develop a callousness to the benefits that we've been provided and the blessings that we've been provided. And it's a constant daily practice to remember to, stay humble. That doesn't mean that great things aren't to come. As I stated, I no longer have the Forerunner. But the truth of the matter is that there's nothing wrong with wanting more things and wanting better things, because I mentioned about, being embarrassed, at different functions and stuff like that. But even in hindsight, looking back, like the Forerunner is like a classic vehicle. That's first of all. So there really was truly no real reason for me to be embarrassed, to be frank, because again, no car payment, it's paid for, got me where I needed to go, never broke down on me aside from the air conditioning. But actually, let me digress a little bit. The struggle in the summertime in Arizona with no air conditioning was exceptionally real. And as a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, those were the circumstances for which I wrote it, because I was so irritated. Like the drive home from work would be, oh my God, you can imagine 118 degrees, your car been sitting in an exposed garage or a parking lot all day. You get in it, let the windows down, and there is no relief at 3:30, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening in Phoenix area. Listen. So, okay, that was a valid reason for being upset, but getting back to being content. I'm learning, like the older I get, just be grateful. Be grateful for every little thing. Don't talk against a blessing. Don't talk against things that are actually serving you. And that was a room of growth for me. And so I would just encourage you that if you're kind of like in that place, where, you're ready for the next, could be a material thing, it could be something more substantive, but you're ready for the next, but you're kind of frustrated with where you are. Just remember, there's always somebody else out there who wish they could be in your shoes. And I say that because when I travel to school Monday through Thursday, I passed by a lady that walks on Monaco Parkway in Denver, and I see her walking all the time. And I'm certain that there are several people who wouldn't mind trading places with you. So I guess what I'm trying to get across is, be grateful. Be grateful for all the things that you have, because there's always somebody worse off than you, to borrow the words from the iconic Be Grateful song from, I believe it was the Walter Hawkins Love Alive 2 album. But be grateful. Be grateful. End of author's comments. Always the assistant. I've always been some type of support staff at every place I've worked. In 2020, during the pandemic and under work from home conditions, this status has become more annoying than anything. But I can only take responsibility for where I am, no matter where that is. At every position I've ever held, I've always excelled as executive assistant, city council aide, financial secretary, administrative assistant. I think you get the picture. In all these positions, I would get to a point of frustration and switch to something else, or my boredom in these positions would align with the promotion for Marlon, which ultimately meant a move, so I always had an out. At some point, we must consider the choices and decisions that lead to our frustrations. For me, Everything always went back to being that pregnant teen who had to show everyone that I was not a failure. Hence, going to school full-time for my bachelor's and later master's degrees. I had this attitude, and if I'm real honest, still do have the attitude where if you tell me what I can't do or doubt me, I'm going to get real quiet and get to work on what I supposedly can't do to prove to you that I can. Initially, I would apply for assistant jobs because while I now had a degree, I didn't have the experience. So one could say that I had to pay my dues. And these sorts of roles were ones that I already felt mastery in when I was a stay-at-home mom. Let's face it, most assistant jobs are type and shadows of what a stay-at-home mom and dad do all the time, which is take care of everyone else. And that came easily to me, except now I was starting to get paid for it. But with the constant moving across state lines for Marlon's career growth and opportunities, I never could quite get to the point of longevity in any job I held. Reflective question. What is your ideal position and or job? Describe it. Are you happy, satisfied, fulfilled? Describe your emotions. Always the assistant, author's comments. Okay, so the title of this, definitely you could tell by the story that this was a point of frustration for me internally, not because of what anybody else said about me or anything. It totally and completely had everything to do with my own mindset about self. And the best way I can describe or explain the frustration associated with always being the assistant has to do with one of my favorite speakers of all time, Lisa Nichols. I used to listen to her when I was an administrative assistant at Arizona State University some years back. And shout out to School of Earth and Space Exploration. Good times there, and still have friends that I'm in contact with, which is so wonderful. But getting back to it, Lisa Nichols, I would listen to that like just as motivation for me, just because it was just such a critical point in my career where I was really wanting change, but not necessarily knowing how to do it, but then also sabotaging myself by not going for, the jobs that I really felt like I should be in position for. And one of the things Lisa Nichols said, and I don't even remember which recording it was on, but she said it multiple times, and that is, she calls out, people who operate for them at a 60 to 70% level of capacity, and that your 60 to 70% is other people's 110%. And I can easily say that that's me. Like, I can get into an admin assistant job, whatever job it is that falls under that category, and I will outwork, and I also will perform at a very high level of excellence. And I think all of my former employers would attest to that. But at the same time, while I'm only putting out 60 to 70%, it was causing me a great deal of frustration because I wasn't operating, number one, I wasn't operating fully in purpose, although all things contribute, to your growth and ultimate success. I can honestly admit that there pretty much has been, aside from me like starting and doing my own thing right now, there's really never been any position to where I gave 110% effort, aside from like being a mom and a wife. But I'm talking about like career-wise. And it was because it was easy for me. And sometimes, we settle on easy because we know that we can do something. We know that we can gain mastery. But again, I would argue strongly that that's an area of self-sabotage, especially when you want to get to the next thing that is actually going to pull on you and require attention. Recall that in the story, I said that, I'm challenged by people who think, which I'm a very perceptive person. So people who think I can't do something, or if I share something with someone and they question my abilities, that's the absolute very thing I'm going to do. And in the story, I say to prove to them that I can do it. But I think ultimately it is to prove to myself that I can do it. For example, writing this book is not a small feat to do self-publishing. It's just not. It's actually incredibly hard, but it's also rewarding at the same time. And then additionally being consistent and disciplined enough to make sure that, you upload your podcast when you say that you're going to upload for your listening audience. All of those things require a great deal of tenacity and push through. And I can also say that it is forcing me to finally be at a place where I operate from 100 to 110% of my capacity, because it's stretching me and lengthening me. So you may recall that I typically don't like to leave you just, open-ended or hanging. So for the people that are listening to me today, I just want to encourage you that, if you are in that place where, people on your job, or you have a job that is not meeting who you know that you are, one of the things that helped me to kind of figure things out was some of the things I shared with you, right? Like therapy, getting to the root cause, like doing a root cause analysis of why I make certain decisions, doing some reshifting and shaping of my mindset and paradigms in order to retrain myself how I think about me. Definitely. I would encourage you to do some of those similar things, or find what works for you in order that you are the best version of you. As cliche, I know, and trendy as that phrasing is, but it's so very true. So many of us are on the path to doing things that will allow for us to become the best version of ourselves. That's certainly the path that I'm on as I push myself in this podcast arena and new authorship arena. But in doing so, I found and tapped into a whole nother side of Evelyn that I kind of always knew was there, but I think I was just slightly afraid of taking the leap. And so I would also just add, don't let fear stop you. There's so many people who go to the grave. I think Les Brown was saying this in one of his things. They go to the grave with so many of the jewels and treasures that they could have provided, but they go because fear gripped them and stopped them from doing things. And for me, I just resolved within myself that I'm not any longer going to be timid or hold back the things that I want to do, the ways in which I do them, because other people don't do it like this, or what is this person going to say? No, you have to do what you feel that you have been called and purposed to do. Otherwise, you're going to continue to hit that wall of frustration, and you're going to continue to be that person that possibly people don't want to talk to because you got a nasty attitude, or you're mean, or you're this, or you're that. But ultimately, the power rests within you to make the decision to move forward. And so, again, encouraging you to take a leap. What is that thing? What is it that you want to do? Take an action step. Get the magic flowing. Take an action step to get to that next phase or next thing that you want to do, so that you can become the best version of yourself. I hope that you have enjoyed these week's stories, as well as my commentary about these stories. I certainly enjoy talking to you each week and engaging in the stories shared in my book. We are nearing the end, which I'm grateful for, and I'm happy to be sharing in the couple weeks here some updates associated with where this podcast is headed next. And so in the meantime, I just want to thank you for listening. That concludes the stories for this week. Remember, the future you is waiting on you. You can follow me on Instagram at Beautiful I'm Colored. Consider subscribing or adding me to your favorites. And also, I will see you next week for another set of stories. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, everyone.